Welcome to Movie and a Beer, everybody. This is Dan, and we have our three amazing friend and co-hosts with us on this wonderful episode where we're going to talk about a really old film from 1981.
It's rather old. It's almost as old as the people on the podcast. It can't be really old if we're not really old, so it's fairly old.
It's older than me.
And it stars Kurt Russell, and it was like written and co-directed or directed.
John Carpenter.
Hey, hold on. Let's introduce our hosts before we introduce the movie.
I mean, we're gonna go around the table here, and we're gonna hear about who's at the table. Who's
at the table? Good evening or morning or whatever, dear listener. This is Aaron. I'm your ridiculously large gun silencer expert.
Yes.
I'm Blake. I'll be your Kurt Russell expert this evening. You know, he played Ego the Living Planet in Guardians of the Galaxy 2. And Wyatt Earp in Tombstone.
And a lot of other things, too.
And I'm Brian, your Cadillac chandelier expert.
Yeah, dude.
Chandelier,
Well done.
what?
Man.
All right,
Brian, I like yours better than mine. I gotta say, well done.
1981.
I've got more experience.
Escape from New York.
older.
Driving chandelier cars.
So the question is, did Brian see this in the theater?
In 1981?
Yeah, did Brian see it in
He
the
would have
theater?
been like 12 or 13, maybe.
No,
It was R-rated.
No, this was one that we snuck at a friend's house who had HBO.
What?
Yeah.
HBO?
Wow.
No, it's not television. It's HBO.
It was the home box office before they started doing like Game of Thrones all the time.
All right. And for you youngins out there, this film takes place in 1997.
In the far future of 1997.
Yes. Where they did not have cell phones or pagers or beepers. They had giant boxes that had little beepy screens
They
on
had
them.
a massive penal colony that was the island of Manhattan.
Yeah, they took some of the most expensive real estate in the world at that time, and they decided to make a giant prison. Great idea.
With
Great
a
idea.
gorgeous
Why not?
soundtrack.
I mean, were you in New York in the late 80s, early 90s?
I was
It
alive.
was pretty
I was
ghetto,
alive in
man.
1981 by barely, but like
but-
I was not in New York.
What's funny is I might have been. I went there for a high school French trip.
That would've been
And
in
it
the
seemed
90s.
fine then.
When you
but-
were like 0 years old? Mine is 3 years old.
Well, not during this movie. I was in
Oh, and you were
2000 something when I was in high school.
Oh, you were talking 1997.
Yeah.
I was talking about when I was in high school French and we went to New York.
Oh,
So-
not okay.
Tu parles français, n'est-ce pas?
Je m'appelle Blake.
Oh, oui, oui.
I would like pan, which is bread.
Yeah.
Don't give me any merde, which is shit.
Fromage.
That's cheese.
Lots of fromage.
Well, Sophie Marceau, like we know all the important.
And speaking of cheese, we watched this film
Boy, howdy. That's a
Yeah.
really good segue.
Thanks
This
for
film
taking
called
us back on
Escape
track.
from New York.
Escape from New
And
York.
we had a couple beers. Tell us
We
about the
did.
beers,
Well,
Dan.
okay, so we'll mention these shortly, and talking more in depth in a moment. We did have a Grains of Wrath, wonderful West Coast IPA called Dystopia, which was selected based solely on the can art because it's got like a New York cityscape with a skull, and it's like the whole point of the film is it's a dystopian future.
Yeah.
And then the other one we had, which is from Fast Fashion, which is out of Seattle. They have a tap room and a brewery location. Is also an IPA. Both of these are IPAs. And the second one, I think, went a little bit better, but we'll talk about that in the future because the future
The
is
distant
way
future
away
of
from the future.
1997.
It's the beer is called Pocket Forensics. It's one of those strange beers that it says the name, but the type is so freaking small on the label, it's not readable. So you just have to know what it's called because it's not mentioned anywhere else on the can.
Oh, good Lord, you're right. Yeah,
Yeah,
that
it
is
is
illegible.
super duper tinky,
Right,
tiny on the
right.
label. But yeah, so both interesting beers. We acquired them. I was out getting food with some friends, one of which is at the table, and I was like, "Hey, I need to pick up some beer for the podcast." And so, yeah, we were with friends. Like Blake's pointing at himself, going, "Me?
You bought these then?
Yeah, these.
Oh, cool.
these
I wasn't
were-
aware. I was wrangling our friends who are insane.
Yes,
Well,
who shall not be mentioned
right.
at this moment in time. But yes, we have friends outside of this group.
You know, there were friends in this movie also.
There were friends in this movie, and they shot guns for each other, which
They
we
sure
would
did.
probably do. I would shoot a gun.
Would
for
you
Jason.
call Brain a friend or like an old acquaintance? Because they seem
Or
pretty
a
unfriendly.
frenemy.
a friend?
Yeah,
of
kind of a
Definitely a
frenemy.
He's a friend.
Snake
The-
didn't have any friends really. He just had people he knew.
To orient our dear listener here, this is a movie I have never seen this before. This venerable classic of a movie.
I'd say cult classic.
I used the word venerable.
You shouldn't.
But so we have Manhattan Island has been turned into an enormous prison because the United States
Crime is up 400%.
Right, 400%. The United States has gone downhill. It's no longer exactly the future that we know or the country we know.
It's intimated that we're at war with both China and Russia.
Right.
There have been military operations in Siberia and Leningrad.
Yes. And so there's this history and kind of world building that's happened because our protagonist references some of his special ops work that's taken place in these various locations. Well, our president, this isn't really a spoiler, it happens in the first 3 minutes, but our president, well, after the credits, the first 3 minutes, the president is lost over this vast penal colony when his plane goes down.
Right. He's on his way to a peace summit with China and Russia.
Right.
With a very important cassette tape.
Yeah.
Yes.
A recording, as it were.
Which was, I genuinely forgot what it was. I'm not doing a bit.
It was something about
cold fusion.
cold fusion and
That's
nuclear
right, that's
energy or
right.
It was
something.
like, hey, the United States is going to share cold fusion with these countries it's at war with because
That's
maybe they'll
right.
stop being at war with us if we
Yeah.
give them our most sensitive secrets.
But since the president's plane crashes due to, it was some kind of like terrorist, right? Like they
there was
got
a
in and took
terrorist
it.
who
And so
got in and
The American forces recruit a former
a Green Beret kind of
Green Beret top tier badass who turned to robbing the fort, the
A criminal.
Federal Reserve.
Who is a criminal, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
They got him to because they go in
not?
themselves and they're told by some rando crazy person, if you don't leave, we're going to kill the president. And so they have to go get someone to get in undetected,
secretly.
real sneaky like,
Well,
and that's where we meet our protagonist.
Search and recover mission with our protagonist being sent
Snake
in.
Plissken.
Snake Plissken, and he'll be given a full pardon for his extensive crimes. If he can do two things, if he can recover the president and bring him back out, and if he can deliver a line in a different emotional tone than every other line in the film.
That was something you wanted. That wasn't required.
we
by
all
the-
wanted
failed
it.
that second
All
mission.
right.
all
So
wanted
this
it.
film starred Kurt Russell.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
did.
we have two different opinions about his acting in this film,
Yes,
which
we
we're
do.
about to talk about right now.
One is the size of a pea, and the other is the size of a pea.
All right.
Which do you choose? Because they're pretty shallow, narrow, and really specific.
So, Blake, why don't you tell us about your opinion of his acting?
I liked it. Now, it might be colored by time and knowing what he inspired, but I liked it. It feels fairly standard 80s badass lead man. Bit of trivia. He has an eye patch in the movie. Kurt Russell did that the first day of shooting. Didn't tell anyone. Said, I think it'd be cool if he had an eye patch. And John Carpenter just agreed with it. Because John Carpenter does seem like the kind of director, writer to say, you know what? That seems cool. Let's go with it.
I think that, based on what was happening, and actually this film was written based off of what happened in the Watergate scandal.
Yeah, that's probably what
Based
inspired
on-
him.
Yeah. It primarily was filmed in St. Louis, Missouri, for about $6 million. And there were
$1981?
Yeah,
Wow.
1980. That's a lot back then.
That was.
But they did shoot some stuff in New York. It was released in July of '81. It got a lot of reviews. It grossed over $25 million, so it made a lot more than it was made for, which is a good
profitable.
sign.
By Hollywood standards, it was a very successful film.
It was considered one of the best science fiction films of that year.
Right.
So, and there was a sequel called
Escape from LA.
Right. But
Later in like 96.
And it also starred. It was written and directed by Carpenter, and also starred Kurt Russell.
Was that set in 1997 as well?
I don't remember. It wasn't as good.
All right.
Which is saying something.
It is. So that's my little 2 cents. I think
like
there's
it.
a lot of really good throwbacks. There's a few scenes of like suspension of belief. There's not a lot of special effects. It's very practical.
yeah, most of the effects were very practical. I mean, and there weren't a lot of them. There were like some planes flying, some escape pod eggs falling through.
Buildings or
Buildings.
whatever.
I found the thing about the computer graphics I was trying to remember. The wireframe computer graphics on the glider, when Snake Plissken's gliding in, it shows port starboard and nose view, and it's all like grids and
So
all that
the
stuff.
head-up display for the secret glider when Snake is infiltrating the prison. Yeah.
Computers capable of 3D wireframe imaging were too expensive at the time, so special effects designers built a model of the city, painted it black, attached bright white tape to the model buildings in an orderly grid, and moved a camera through a model city.
Yeah.
Like that wasn't computer graphics. That was just practical effects.
That was a
they did
practical
to
effect.
save money.
I didn't realize
That
like
was
that was
made
Doesn't
to
it
look
look good, right?
like
Yeah.
janky computers
Yeah.
of the area.
It
eras.
does.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
that-
it kind of looked like Tron in a lot of ways.
A little bit.
How they are like Star
Another
Wars.
Kurt Russell classic,
Yes.
which I think we've done on the podcast.
Yes. But
But yeah, he goes in. Snake Plissken goes in, immediately faces a bunch of hardships. We meet like the weird characters of this massive kind of society at this point. Like when in
they have their own art and their own theater. They have
their own theater.
yeah.
They've got a society of rat people.
Well, there's a political structure with a duke.
Yep, played by Isaac Hayes.
yeah. Well, you
Damn
you
right.
know, this story is a classical hero's journey.
Right.
The hero has to travel across the landscape and overcome each obstacle to get to his end goal.
Now, I would argue, does he change as a person? Because the hero's journey you usually grow in some way, right?
He doesn't, and that's one of my problems with the. I mean, he's still a fu,
Yeah.
to the authorities
Yeah.
at the end.
I don't
he
think this-
doesn't change in any way.
What he does,
Yeah.
he does at the very end. This is not really a spoiler, but
I mean,
through the
this
whole
movie's so old; it's free of spoilers.
The whole movie, he says, "Call me Snake, call me Snake, call me Snake." At one of the
The
final
very
frames, he
end.
does say, "My name's Pliskin." So he does at some
guess.
minute. But Brian,
That's
in
not
the
much of
whole,
an arc.
In the whole, I agree with you.
That's
this
not much
this
of
is
an
a
arc.
character who that is the largest change I observed. My other criticism is that this character has one emotion. This character has one delivery, one emotional energy, and it's the same in every situation. It's the same with every line that's delivered. It doesn't matter if he just saw somebody die or if he almost died or whatever. He's angry, and it doesn't matter what's just happened. He's angry.
I'd argue he's either angry or slightly annoyed.
I mean, I made a
got the
joke.
two- he's got the two
I made a
right.
joke at the end of like, oh, I'm feeling an emotion that's not anger. I'm so confused. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
because that's what this character. The character is so one dimensional for me, and I don't know that I can understand as a campy, fun movie like that's not a lot of work and just you want to kick back some beers and have some fun.
Yeah.
Like, you can-
Having seen The Thing, which I think came out a year after this, would you say he has more of a growth as McCready versus Snake?
I think I prefer McCready as a character. The Thing, I think, is a better movie, and I think I would have to revisit The Thing, but I think there was at least more emotional breadth.
Depth, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, so
I can see that.
He
I'd buy
knew
that.
he was going to die if he didn't escape.
Yeah, he got
With
the
the
classic
president. He
like
was given
neck,
a choice.
neck injections.
Yeah.
Very sci-fi thing to like pump things into a guy's neck and say, if you don't do this mission, your head's going to explode.
Yeah. So he had no choice. And in The Thing, he had a choice. He could have just ran.
Or at some point, does The Thing have a choice?
I know, right?
Bum,
Because
bum, bum, bum.
we know that they're both the thing at the end. That's why.
Bum,
do we
bum,
know that?
bum.
We don't
know
really
that.
know that. We
know
John
that.
Carpenter
But-
refuses to confirm anything.
Oh, no.
At
It's been-
at conventions, he said, like, I'm not telling you. The point is that you don't know.
Yeah, and that's why the movie's creepy. That's what makes it good.
But anyway, we're talking about Escape from New York.
Yeah.
Which is less creepy
which
and more
had
just
a similar
wild.
soundtrack.
It was
John
all
Carpenter
thumping.
knows what he likes to do, and
Yeah.
it's a lot of piano
a lot
and
of,
synth.
a lot of deep bass.
Boom, 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 boom.
Kind of a drone recurring.
Yep,
Yeah.
Which is like annoying to some people.
I liked
Oh
it.
my God, it was boring.
But I don't know if that's just a misplaced nostalgia or if I genuinely actually enjoy it.
Well, you played video games when that was kind of what video games did.
It did inspire Solid Snake, and I played all but like
I thought you said Metal Gear Solid.
two of the. I mean, the character is Solid Snake,
Oh,
but the
Metal
game
Gear.
series is Metal Gear Solid.
Metal Gear Solid.
Solid Snake's the protagonist,
Yes.
and then Big Boss the protagonist, and then Silent Snake later is it gets real confusing.
Okay, this had some legacy. Is the way we can
Yeah.
succinctly.
It inspired quite a bit, I think, in Hollywood and video games. It's just the product itself doesn't hold up as well as I thought it did. I suggested for the podcast. I thought this is a fun cult classic movie.
But I would offer that it did have several memorable characters, like
Yes.
fun characters.
Yeah.
Like there's Ernest Borgnine playing a cabbie who kind of just drives around and is a feel good character.
he's been
in
driving for 30 years. He knows the city.
right,
And
in
a
this
welcome injection of positive emotional energy.
right in this
with
terrible
yeah.
city.
Yeah.
There's
Brain.
Brain.
Played by Harry Dean Stanton.
Yeah, who's kind of the smart guy that keeps the city running,
Right.
in spite of its anarchy.
Yeah.
There's the crazy sidekick to the Duke of New York,
Who-
which is he kind of looks like William Dafoe with crazy heat miser hair.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Heat miser. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's some serious Afro action going on.
That guy only shows up twice, but he stands out every time.
Yeah, and kind of this henchman cackle, like the little creature that sits next to Jabba the Hutt,
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
And then
We got the Duke played by Isaac Hayes.
and the dude
with his very cool, very apocalypse style, like chandelier headlights.
on his pink cat,
on his
Well,
cat.
and his endless charisma that he brings
that
into
he
every
just
role.
brings to every role.
It's
Right.
just, and everyone was sweaty
Yeah.
all the time.
Which was a
Yeah.
kind of a thing of the 70s and 80s. Like they didn't have people mopping everyone up off all the time. Like they kind of stopped happening towards like the 90s. Like people were less sweaty in movies then.
Well, it became effortless to be so successful and to do your Mission Impossible stuff. It became effortless.
Yeah.
You didn't have sweat.
Well, I mean, if there was sweat, it was the one droplet in Mission, like literally in Mission Impossible to set off the alarm. That's a whole thing.
Right, yeah. But what I want
But
to
yeah,
ask
they
is
just look like people. They look like regular people.
in the genre of like films that have this dystopian future. You know, you could think of kind of RoboCop being, companies gone wild.
Like our beer.
You could think,
Dan just waved it in Aaron's face, and that's
and
why
now
everyone's
I'm completely
confused.
distracted of other dystopian future movies. I like Mad Max. I think we were talking about a
Yeah.
little bit.
The Running Man.
Absolutely. Logan's Run.
Like, where does this live in the realm of dystopian future movies? Like,
I feel like it kicked off a few of them. It's kind of a trendsetter. It has that. I pointed out. There's always like detritus and extra just junk sitting around. Because like you
and
just
random fires burning.
people become random fires burning.
Yeah, I mean,
Trash in the
people
streets.
just becoming hoarders in the apocalypse because you don't know when you're going to get another door. So just hold on to these 15 doors.
I mean, even Blade Runner or Blade Runner 2049.
yeah.
The cities are always kind of dingy and they're what's left over after all the rich people left Earth.
Yeah, nothing.
Or even Elysium, the movie
Elysium.
Oh
Elysium.
yeah, the
Yeah.
Matt Damon movie
with Matt Damon. Yeah.
About garbage.
Or
Well, shoot, Idiocracy is technically a post-apocalypse movie, like, in
Yeah,
a sense, and that's messy as hell.
I feel like that one's not like sci-fi in the way that the other examples that we've been talking about are like essentially sci-fi about this like really dingy
Earth
future.
has decayed. The cities have decayed
Wall-E?
so much.
Wall-E. I was going to say Wall-E.
Yeah,
is-
Wall-E is
like-
just all trash and one little robot.
Yeah.
or even like I guess the Matrix, kind of, because there's the kind of a horrible truth to that.
Sort of, yeah.
Future, like-
If it's real.
The little bit of trash there is because there's just nothing else, nowhere else to put it, nothing else to do with it. I feel like this was a good like jumping off point for people, for people seeing this to be inspired, like in the same sense like Metal Gear Solid was inspired by it. I think later post-apocalypse movies saw this and thought, oh, ooh, okay, yeah, I like what they're doing. I can go with that.
And it's simple. This is not a complex movie. It's very straightforward. The plot is very, very narrow. There's not a lot of side story. There's a few extra characters you meet along the way who are like, "Oh, I thought you were dead. I heard about you."
Yeah,
But it's
there's-
basically it's
There's
Snake.
memorable characters, but there's not a lot of
There's
character development.
literally like 10 characters in this whole movie. Literally. Like
Yeah.
there's the guy, the vice president, there's the dude in charge, there's the scientist, there's our
Shoot, I forgot about the
protagonist,
scientist until he
there's-
showed up at the end to X-ray out the nano
and he
machines.
does he's like, I'm going to shoot you with this, and then he turns to the boss and says, "Tell him what it is."
Yeah,
and he's
that
like,
was
"Why would
such
I
a
do
weird
that?"
line.
It's like,
It's like,
why
well,
would
tell him. Like, you're gonna say it right then, bud. Okay. What a weird way to. What a
Yeah.
truncated
Well,
way
Well,
to put
the
that.
whole-
The whole purpose of the bombs was to motivate him to
Correct.
go quickly, and that doesn't work if he doesn't know they're gonna blow up. Like,
I think the
Yeah.
move was like get him in him and
Plot
then
device.
tell him. Yeah.
Plot device.
Because he's not gonna let it happen from this nerd if you tell him we're gonna put bombs in your neck now. Go get him, Chauncey or whatever.
yeah,
that guy
cowboy
was.
or whatever you call him. Yeah. So and when he got into the city, there was literally the cabbie, the brains,
Maggie.
Maggie, hanger on, and then
The one person who got eaten by sewer people.
yeah. Well,
Oh,
then
yeah,
I
sewer-
would even consider that as a supporting role. That was just part of the.
There's kind
story.
of a little bit of world building, I'd argue. It's just that
She
she
was
was
in one
telling
scene.
you, you're out here at night, not a good time to be here.
She was
Yeah.
in one
a
scene.
little bit of like
Yeah, she was
Yeah.
as much a character as the
Rat people.
homeless guy who was wearing the president's watch.
Yeah.
okay,
You had a few
I
lines,
guess
but
so.
Again, I mean, they leave. So I appreciate the fact that they don't explain everything. Like, how do people even get there? You
Yeah.
just get dropped off. What?
It's that Mad Max style of world building where they just say a detail and just
Yeah.
leave it up to the audience to say that's probably this.
It's just a crap world, and these people have to live in it.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's a point where they reference something Snake did before the film's events, and you're left to think, ooh, okay, he did something big that got him this.
Notoriety.
Yeah.
Like St. Petersburg.
Yeah, and everybody he meets in the
Leningrad.
prison knows who Snake Plissken is,
They just all think he was dead.
and they all think he's already dead. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of what we hope about some of the political figures of today's age. But we're not going to go there. We're digressing.
Yeah, we're not that kind of podcast.
Again, we mentioned the political side of it. So you have a political figure, the president, who has been...
Who's kind of a nothing sandwich, honestly.
He is.
Right.
There's nothing to him. And it's just like, oh, rescue me or blah, blah, blah.
I mean, he's the MacGuffin for Snake. Like, that's the whole thing is like the Snake's... It's like a video game, basically. You're given the mission, you go in, you find the plot twist, like, oh, his tracker's not on him. Where would he be? Get some information. Oh, he's here. Okay, there he is.
Well, I said at one point that character doesn't feel very presidential because they're just kind of hapless.
right,
They're
yeah.
kind of flowing along.
Short, fat, and bald.
But he also just like accepts everything that's going on in this world around him. Like that character has no inner directive or action.
Correct.
No initiative
Until the end when he does away with one of his tormentors.
Oh, yeah, he does fire that gun. That looks pretty cool.
Oh yeah.
Okay, and speaking of firing guns...
I mean,
How
let's
many
dig
Hollywood
let's dig
clips?
into the Hollywood clips.
How
and
many
the,
Hollywood clips are in this one? Like he literally squeezed
hit.
in the trigger. He's holding an Uzi, which at the time is about maybe 12 inches long, and he had a silencer on the end of it that was 12 inches long,
Ridiculous.
and a scope on this
On the
handheld
silencer.
Uzi on the
It's basically on the
silencer,
silencer, yeah.
which was like,
Yeah.
this makes no sense.
I didn't catch what it was until like halfway through the movie and started cackling. Like, this is a
And
great design.
Maybe so. It's like a pistol that you press the
With
trigger
an
and it's an
extended
auto.
clip that maybe holds
Maybe 20.
40?
No,
Which-
not even that. No. If it held 40, it'd be twice as long. So it's about a 20 between
20
like
round
a
mag.
21 mag. It stuck out the bottom. You can
So,
see
like,
it wasn't
3
totally
seconds
short.
of shooting though. Like
It's literally anyone who's ever fired a handgun.
Now,
or
I would-
a
the only
rifle
argument I
that's
would
automatic
make-
is
I'm not trying to like, ride or die for this movie, but I would argue it's ostensibly a futuristic movie. The idea being maybe it's a futuristic gun. I don't know.
so they have bullets that actually don't take physical space until you fire them.
Kind of.
They're
I play a
qu-
lot of. I play
they
a lot
are
of first
quantum
person.
bullets.
quantum bullets.
I played a lot of first-person shooters where it just gives you a little reader of like, yeah, here's all the ammo you have, and it lets you reload a whole clip after firing one bullet.
I have 293 bullets left.
Yeah. And
Now, I'm not saying that forgives the film. It's obviously a huge oversight,
yeah.
but
I mean,
maybe it's
and
a future gun.
You think about all the films that were prior to this that had weapons. I mean, you think of all of the war films and TV shows and things where people were firing.
If I ever write a
weapons.
western, I'm gonna have a shot where guys like unloading the spent 6-shooter and reloading. I mean, that's one of my favorite things in westerns is when they're reloading the 6 shells.
It
to get
adds
the gun
drama.
out.
It adds
Yeah.
drama of like,
Yeah.
is he going to finish in time, or he's currently vulnerable? Is he going to get blown away?
Like
That was one of the
he-
highlights for the Gray Man. But was them going like, I thought you loaded it. I didn't have time to load it. When did you see me? It was like a nice little kind of call out to Hollywood clips.
Yeah, I mean, he literally within like when he did land in New York and then was walking around like he lived there, even though everyone's like, "Who are you?" Oh, it doesn't matter.
Maybe he grew up there. We
I
don't know
don't know.
about Snake
Wait,
Plissken.
he had those camo tights that
He had
made
those
it like, yeah.
winter camo tights. They were kind of like BDUs, but they were tights because there was no folded fabric anywhere. It was like, ooh, those are some serious tight action going on right there. I don't know
A little
what
bit.
was that.
You gotta show off the whole.
And then
you
his
gotta
little-
show off the whole
All of
Russell.
the snake magic.
The snake magic, because then that shirt that he had on, the sleeveless shirt, which was kind of like neoprene, like
but like silver something.
epaulets on
No,
the.
Kind
he
of.
had like zips.
Yeah, I don't know what was going on.
Listeners,
with that shirt.
Google it. It's a great look.
The epaulets were for the Duke, who had this jacket that had these like old Napoleonic,
Yeah.
Yeah.
on the shoulders.
That's
It was-
the Duke.
Oh, that's
the
a
Duke
good.
of New
Yeah,
York.
that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. So the costuming, I give an A+.
Yeah, costume.
I would say, yeah, costume design in this was great.
And,
I liked it.
And there were a few moments in the film where there were time jumps that weren't, you just literally cut to scene. We're in the middle of the day, and now we're in the middle of the night.
That
and it's literally
was-
them running down a hall, and then suddenly it cuts, and we're
That
like,
felt a little bit
wow.
like they ran up against time budget, like a time crunch, and said, "We just make it happen." That's what it felt like to me. Was John Carpenter saying, "All right, so we screwed up," because apparently he was filming from like all night. Would go to sleep like 6 a.m., wake up around 1 to look at dailies, get ready, and then shoot all night. So he didn't see the sun for like a few months. Which, having worked an overnight shift, before, it sucks.
Yeah, it screws you up.
So
Yeah.
to the editor at the table,
Sure.
how
Yeah, Aaron.
how could have this been addressed more easily instead of, or is it they did a good job because they didn't have to? They said, okay, we were waving down a helicopter as it was landing in the middle of the day, and then suddenly we cut to a scene that it feels like a continuation of the previous scene, but is not, because now they're somewhere else. It's like, what?
I mean, they probably could have shot a pickup where he's looking at his timer.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, that was a
Kept looking at
device.
it. He looked at it a lot.
Yeah, and he could have said, oh, shit, the timer's a 24-hour clock, and it's really countdown. And he could have just said, oh, my God, it's 8 a.m. I only have 16 hours.
That's a good point.
And that would be a simple way to talk about the ticking clock and kind of mark you, okay, I'm at dawn, I'm at noon, I'm at sunset, and also at the same time talk about how much time you
Right.
got
Yeah.
left.
So the film takes place over that 22 hours.
Right, and that could have been used as I think a great dramatic device to,
plot
to
driver.
use.
It sort of was,
to add
but
a
they
lot of
weren't
pressure.
specific about when the hours
right,
were.
but I feel like as a viewer, like I got kind of muddled of like
Yeah,
what time.
we
it
had
is.
we had no sunset or sunrise.
Right.
We had full night
And full day.
and then
like
Two
sort
full-
of dawn.
2 scenes with full day.
there was one sort of dawn ish.
Kind of where everybody was running around. They were like panicking. Like it feels like early, but I wasn't sure.
And then 2 daytime scenes, and then suddenly we were full night again.
yeah,
Right.
driving
Yeah.
a car.
And
and
Driving
it's
a
like,
car
which
somewhere
Dan
in New
did
York.
appropriately call out. Like, why is it night again?
There's no
I couldn't think of an
continuity
answer.
here.
Like, I don't know.
Well, we did talk about at that point, like, oh, he's on a timer, and we know that there's a certain amount of time. So if it was 24 hours or 20 hours or 20 or 18 hours later,
Yeah,
it would
he-
be
Now,
night again.
the
'cause he
timer
flew
was
in at
separate
night.
from the thing he saw on the other guy's wrist, right? The tracker.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, the
Okay.
timer was on his own wrist.
That's right.
Yeah.
But
Which he
and,
did.
and I think there's probably like higher standards now. I think if this movie were to have been made today, there would have been, I think, a lot more attention paid to continuity. A lot more of that countdown would be used to drive some of the pressure.
I could almost
tension.
see as part of like the visual effects and putting the timer on the screen, a la 24.
Oh,
like
yeah.
for like certain scenes, it's just ticking.
Bloop, bloop. Yeah. And that could have helped with the auditory
yeah.
Yeah.
portion of it as well, where you hear the ticking when you don't.
But would
need
have gotten
it.
away with all that beautiful synths and keyboard.
I know. This is
Although
so
we talked
synthy.
briefly about the settings, like if it was a soundstage, if it was actually New York. Apparently, it was shot in Missouri, which I forgot
Yeah,
about.
St. Louis.
And
A
I
lot
love
of
the
it.
sets. I thought the sets looked great. It felt appropriately,
Post-apocalyptic.
post-apocalyptic. Yeah.
Even though it wasn't, it was just like, oh, hey, you have no running water, you have no power.
Well, it
you
was
have
messy
nothing.
looking, which is what I assume post-apocalypse is
Messy,
like.
yeah.
I've seen
And-
The Walking Dead.
Yeah,
It
when-
just looks like a trash heap.
When there's no government services, there's no electricity, there's no running water.
These
and
scuzzy
there's
criminals aren't
apparently-
going to do anything about
There's
it.
no food, so people are cannibals. That's the way it is.
Well, and people will come out through manhole covers in the street, come up from the sewers,
Hunting for other people.
hunting for other people, and they'll move in a way that's unnatural for a human,
Yeah,
but
Yeah,
it's
like a rat.
as if
reminiscent
they're
of a
zombies or rats.
rodent. Right.
They had a couple that looked very zombie-like.
Yeah.
And their movement, as soon as you saw the dudes running around like little pack of rats, the shot went to him
actual rats.
in a building with rats at his feet. So
Which
it's
feels
kinda
like a classic
right,
film technique of, hey, we want to evoke this feeling. Here's what you're looking at.
Yeah, the shift to a metaphor. So, is this a like dystopian sci-fi movie with some horror movie elements?
I don't know about the horror, because the
Well,
point of horror is that you feel like you're helpless. The snake never feels helpless.
Yeah, he never
Even when
feels anything. Blake, we
even-
talked about this.
He's just there.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but I'm going to continue my point. He's the badass hero who, even when he gets an arrow in his leg, continues to whip ass, kill dudes. It doesn't stop until he's overrun by too many enemies.
Yeah.
So I'd say less horror and more just, you're seeing how messed up this world is through the lens of our eye-patched hero or protagonist, I suppose.
He's not even a hero. He's an anti-hero.
Yeah. At the very most, anti-hero. Yeah.
He's like, I'm being
That's
forced
why
to
it
do,
pivoted to protagonist.
Yeah, I'm being forced to do something I don't want to do. Screw you guys, but I'm going to do it because don't want to.
I'm gonna light this match on this table and smoke this cigarette.
He is kind of a selfish character.
Yeah.
Well, he doesn't want to die.
It's Kurt Russell lobbied to get this role to shake off his Disney image because he did a lot of other Disney a lot of Disney films as a kid before doing this in The Thing. So this kind of helped him
The
shake
Thing
off the
being the movie called The Thing.
Yes.
Not just
John,
doing the thing.
John Carpenter's The Thing.
John Carpenter's
Yes.
The Thing.
And then
And
he
this is
finally-
also John Carpenter's Escape from New York.
Yes.
So how many?
It's
of
the other
his-
thing that John Carpenter.
How many movies of his say John Carpenter's? Before the
John
title?
Carpenter's Halloween, I think, is one that does it.
Halloween. No, it
Halloween's
says
really
that.
good, honestly. That's a good horror movie.
It is John Carpenter's Halloween.
Hell yeah.
Yes, it really
was
is. If you
it
look at the
Escape
official
from
title.
L.A.? Was John Carpenter's Escape from L.A.?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not to be confused with anybody else's Escape.
That's
from
probably written into all his contracts.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
If you want him as the director,
He's going to put his
gonna-
name apostrophe
up front
possessive apostrophe S title of movie.
because it's his. Damn it.
Speaking of contracts, I'm sure there were some brewing contracts that led to brewing production.
Oh, yeah,
led
yeah,
to
yeah.
a future
So
where
smooth.
where we were able to drink some
I
of
mean,
these beers.
that's the best we got because there's no drinking in this movie. We
There's
drank while watching
none.
this movie.
Yeah, we drank while watching it. We also hydrated a little bit. We
I'm sure
later.
that people were doing like some kind of hooch, some kind of
Turlet wine.
moonshine,
Turlet wine, yeah.
gin,
You gotta make
bathtub
sangria
gin.
in the turlet.
Some people were making bathtub gin in that prison. Of
What do we think
Manhattan.
Ernest Borgnine was drinking?
Bathtub gin.
Yeah, he's a bathtub gin man.
You know it. Ethanol, pure ethanol, like a
A little for
off
a
of.
little for the taxi cab, a little for old Ernest Borgnine. Gulp, gulp, gulp.
Yep. What was his character's name?
I don't know.
We'd have
He's
to look
Mermaid
it
Man
up.
to me.
Yeah.
He's just the taxi driver,
The
right?
taxi driver.
Cappy.
All right, so
I'm gonna
this is,
look it up.
This is the point in time of the podcast where we're going to start talking about beers. So we
Yeah.
watched Escape from New
I
York.
like beer.
Yeah, he's just called Cabby in the
Cabby,
credits.
nice.
Nicely done, Brian.
Yeah, we had a couple of West Coasty style, some double dry hopped IPAs, EPAs.
IPAs.
We knew what we were going to watch ahead of time. We had stopped at Cerveza the other day, and I was like, "Hey, we're watching this post-apocalyptic film." So I found a can that has a skull and a really interesting bit of artwork on the front.
The can
from
works
Grains of
great. I
Wrath.
love the can work.
Dystopia IPA, and the other one I was thinking, well,
Oh,
he
good
uses
lord! I hadn't seen this.
he's-
Yeah, the lights were off when we were drinking these. Aaron didn't get a preview.
Wow,
it's
that
pretty
is
creepy.
very apocalyptic, very dystopian sci-fi future. Here, you need a
and
picture.
then
Blake?
the other can, of course, we'll talk about in a moment. Pocket
got a-
Forensics, which is just a matchbook on this kind of
with a fly swatter.
with a fly swatter. It is, and a couple of matches are gone. So you want to say, well, okay, what the heck?
Or is that a spatula?
I think it's a fly swatter. I don't think it's a spatula because it's a little too flat.
Okay.
Does it say something about me that I genuinely saw it and thought, yeah, spatula? It never crossed my mind to be a fly swatter.
I don't know. It could be many things because it's just a black shape on a white space.
It could be toast with a knife. Because I mean,
Oh,
so
it
dear
could,
listener,
it could.
it's just the black
The
silhouette of a
square.
shape, and we can't really
a rectangle with another line coming
a
on.
rectangle with a line departing.
The inside of a matchbox.
All right,
And,
Blake's
all
giving
right,
me the
so Dystopia West Coast IPA from Grains of Wrath, 7%, unknown IBUs. It has some interesting things in it, but I'm going to let Aaron read some copy for us.
It's a bold West Coast IPA featuring Simcoe, Citra, and HBC 586 hops of bright flavors and aromatics of tropical punch, pine, mango, and citrus. The end is nigh. Drink beer.
Now, how would Snake Plissken read it?
He'd be really angry and he'd say, a bold West Coast IPA and FU government.
I think it'd be more like a bold West Coast IPA featuring Simcoe, Citra.
But he had only one anyhow. So this
He
was
only
a
had
lovely
one-
beer.
Anyway,
yeah.
No, that was a beautiful rating.
Thank you.
We digress a little bit. So
Yeah,
Grains
it's a
of
nice little
Wrath,
copy. I
out
like
of
this.
out
This-
of the Couve, out of Vancouver, well, Washougal and
Is this the
Washington
one that I
State.
compared to like a shoegaze or noise rock, where it was like there's so much intense noise
Yes.
you begin to hear
Yeah.
stuff out of it. So like the hops on this, dear listener,
Are
are
intense.
so over the top, so intense that you begin to like pick out some of the fruit amongst the incredible noise, the shoegaze distortion guitar that is the hops in this beer.
And that's when you first drink it. I noted as I was taking my time and sipping it, it tastes a bit
Changed.
smoother as it warmed up.
settled down as it warmed up, which
Yeah.
some beers do, and this one
Which,
does that.
which
really
we all
nicely.
do, hopefully, as we grow older, is to settle down a little bit.
just a little bit.
Aaron.
I'm settling up. I don't know what you're talking about.
That's why Aaron's always punching dudes.
All right, our non-hop drinker in the crowd, Mr. Brian, thoughts? Too
Well,
much?
It was fine. We all agreed when we took our first sip, boy, this is a hoppy beer. Mm-hmm. But it was okay. I've tasted far more hoppy beers
Yeah.
that I didn't like.
And-
And this was okay.
And again, remember, folks, IBUs don't equate to the amount of flavor bitterness you're going to get. IBUs is just the International Bitter
You
Units.
start paying me $1 every time you say it around me because I could retire at this point.
What's like chemical bitterness?
So the other
Chemical
day I had a
brothers.
beer that was a beer style that wasn't supposed to have like barely any hop flavor to it. It was like, hey, this is just an amber ale.
Yeah.
And it had like 70 IBUs, but you didn't taste them. So again, depending on what the flavor profile is of the hops, that's what you're going to get. And so again, Simcoe and Citra, typical. So Simcoe is pine, Citra is the citrus,
That's right,
HBC,
Simcoe's
which is an acronym for the
Yeah, you know me.
Yeah, HBCA. So they didn't name it. It's like that's just the scientific name that the hop has been assigned before it gets then mass produced and then put out there. So it's like an experimental hop. Probably has like the New England style juicy kind of character that we were getting out of it, that tropical punch. And then
I mean, I
again,
did get the citrus and mango and stuff like that. That came through over the hops.
It does. It does. And
I got
and
some citrus, but I didn't get any of the mango.
really-
I'm not too super familiar with what mango flavors
a
are.
really nice medium body. Not overcarbonated. There was some carbonation in it, so you knew that. Oh, hey, I'm sipping it. A little dancing on the tongue when you sipped it. Most of us drank it out of a can. Aaron, you had it out of a glass, didn't you? Or
No,
was it-
Brian did.
Brian
I had it out of a
Brian was
glass.
nice enough to let
So-
me get a nose of it.
Yeah,
to see what
aromatics did it when it was first poured. What did you smell, if you remember?
I don't remember specifically this beer. I can talk a lot more about the aromatics of the second beer.
Okay.
Well, Dan, if I can ask,
No.
we're saying earlier, like IBUs, it's a chemical measure.
Yes.
It's not necessarily related to the
The
perceptive
flavor.
hoppiness of the beer or the perceptive bitterness of the beer. What can a brewer do when they're brewing if they want to accentuate some of those hops or maybe downplay some of the hop and bring out some of the other dynamics that are in a beer?
So you're either going to, it's determinant on when you add it to the boil, if you're adding the hops to the boil, or if you're going to add it as a secondary or a tertiary, a third hopping, where you're taking raw product and putting it into the beer.
Like steeping it almost like
Steeping
tea.
it like a tea, but it's just normal temperature.
Okay.
So you're putting either a pellet or fresh leaf or whole leaf or something, some sort of form factor or even extract, because there are hop extracts, hop oil extracts. You can add directly to your beer to give it flavor and to give it bitterness.
I know our longtime listeners will be like, I can't believe Aaron's asking this same question again.
Blake's like that right now.
But dry hopping.
Dry hopping means they're using a dry product and they're putting it on the secondary or the
But
third.
beer is wet.
Yeah. Okay. But the product you're putting in is not. So,
So the hops are dry.
This is
You're
a
adding-
lore.
You're adding
fresh
it to
hop
the.
means,
Is it the wort? Adding
Fresh
it-
hop means it's not been dried out.
So it,
Bum,
Dry
bum,
hopping means the
bum.
product's been dried out.
so
Science, I'm telling you.
Do they put
Whoa!
it? Is it like lumber? Do they put it into like a kiln at a low heat and like cure it?
No,
They
no,
stuff
no,
a whole
you know,
log into the brew.
They let it dry out and then
Okay.
they create pellet out of it. They pelletize it. So they
that's
pull
right.
the
I've seen
leaf
that.
matter
I have-
off.
yeah,
and it looks like little rabbit food, little teeny pellets.
Like rabbit food, yeah. It does. And then to just add then fresh hops, it would be the same as any agricultural product.
When you see the term wet hop, that's a fresh hop. That's what that means.
That seems like I hear that less often.
Yeah.
Is that because it's just like the norm and BAU, or is it just because it's
would
not?
that
it's
be
done
like
It's a
frequently?
language thing. It
Like
doesn't- it's a
loose
thing.
tea,
Yeah.
sort of.
Well, okay. So dry hops can be loose leaf.
Okay.
They can be freezer, like they can be
Freeze-dried.
freeze dried from a wet product to a dry product when you freeze dry them, because the freezing pulls all the liquid out. It turns it to ice. And then when you put it into your product, it's not necessarily a wet product. It's been freeze dried. So yeah. We're getting into a lot of stuff I'm not terribly 100% familiar with. I don't know a lot about hop production and how they handle it on the back end, but having seen and been to a few places that do grow hops, and they have a giant thing. Depending on the time of season and how much of the crop they're producing to do as fresh versus pelletized versus flash frozen. So you still take the fresh matter that you would sell as a wet hop, and you're just freezing that. And then you can get loose leaf. But when you're doing loose leaf, it's a 10 to 1 ratio. So if I need 1 ounce, I then need 10 ounces of leaf matter versus 1 ounce
Because
of
wet,
pellet.
it takes up more volume.
It's not been pelletized
It's not
and
been
compressed.
pressed.
correct.
Yeah.
Because you still have additional matter that's in it,
kind
not
of
just the leaf.
filler, so to speak.
Yeah, there's a lot of stems and the parts of the leaf
And
that
flies and
don't
bugs
provide.
and
Yes, no, seriously, and even pelletized
Rat
there's-
people living underneath
My
the
wife's
jail
a
in New
gardener.
York.
She grows hops.
Yes,
So.
so
I will
there's
say that-
things in it that so you can use them at different stages. So you can use them fresh, you can use them dry, you can freeze them. Freezing them eliminates some of the
Some of
bacteria.
the water and
And the bacteria
pests.
and things. So freezing is actually the best product. It just takes a lot of that matter to get the same amount that you would out of a pellet.
This sounds like a lot of it is kind of more recent innovation with brewing and brewing technique and brewing
You can
methodology.
thank the pod industry for that.
But probably for a lot of things. But I
Exhale
will
noise.
say, traditionally, where Portland is situated in the Willamette Valley, it's the perfect growing conditions for hops.
Yes.
And my understanding is that the microbrew culture really took hold here in Portland because we had hops accessible with perfect growing conditions, and then from the Cascade Mountains, exceptionally pure water.
Yes.
And those are the two main ingredients that you need to make a really good beer. And I think, there are some maybe historic advantages for, Portland, or, there are certainly places in Germany or the Czech Republic or other places that have, these agricultural advantages. But I think the industry, there's been a lot of kind of levelers that have happened that allow, you could be in St. Louis where maybe it's more difficult to grow hops, and some of
But
those
you can access
you can
good
act-
hop matter.
because you can find these freeze dried or the pellets or the other recent innovations and still make a really incredible beer. And in a way, I think that's really good for beer drinkers because now we've got a whole lot more players in the industry that can experiment. And,
You have more options.
You have more options, and then also too, more competition too. I think is kind of that's in the end good for everybody.
Oh yeah, it feels similar to
Capitalism.
not to get too meta, but with podcasting, like the only people talking into a microphone you could hear were like either coast radio stations and a couple of
I'm Hugh Downs. Thank you for joining.
yeah, like a couple of spots across the U.S. where
all
it's
the
like,
rest of
oh
the
man, this
story.
is you got your Howard Sterns, you got your
Boy, I go to Hugh Downs. You go to Howard Stern.
God,
this tells a lot.
Well, I'm trying to think of like a New
big
York.
jump.
Well,
That's
I'm
a
trying to
big
think of a
jump.
New York-based shock DJ, and then like a West Coast, which I can't think of any. But I know West Coast was big on
there's
it.
a guy named Izzy
Something like that.
yeah.
But basically, like,
Rodney on the rock.
in the sense of that's all you had, and now we're fortunate enough to be able to just record ourselves. Like Dan got this wonderful equipment for us to record these wonderful discussions on.
I mean, now I can
in
find
a
a
similar
podcaster
vein.
named Lisa in every U.S. state and listen to their podcast.
Yeah, it's a similar vein.
Okay, so
I can't think of a good way to segue into the second beer. I was trying to
Fly swatter.
I was trying.
We've digressed way off.
Clap was.
But that's okay.
I was trying to find a way to work it back in. I failed. I apologize.
The second beer is called Pocket Forensics.
Oh,
and
this
it's
is double dry
double dry hopped IPA from
Double
Fast,
Dog Dare.
Fast Fashion.
I'm not going to look that poll again.
in the industry. It's called a DDA, double dry hopped.
Double dry. Well,
DDA.
DDA. Shouldn't that be DDH? DDA
Yes,
is
DDH,
demand deposit
sorry,
account.
yeah,
That's a
yeah.
banking term.
Yeah,
Oh
okay,
man.
so
Gross.
DDH.
Yeah.
This is a beer that is fairly new.
Da-da.
It's not what I don't believe it's one of their core beers because I had to do a little digging on the research for it. But this is 6.8% IBU, is unknown. So double dry hop means they put double the amount of normal hops you would for a New England style into it, which I think because they used Eldorado, Freestyle New Zealand, Cascade, Cashmere.
Cashmere.
I'm
That's the only marketing copy I had to
There's
read.
not a lot of copy.
Brewed
on
with
it.
Eldorado Freestyle, New Zealand Cascade, NZ. New Zealand?
New Zealand.
All right. And New Zealand Cascade and Cashmere hops. It's warm, cozy like a sweater.
So
I was going to ask, darn it, I lost it when Aaron started doing the copy. You're saying, the IBUs.
Yes.
The fact that they don't have IBUs, is that a problem?
it's
is
not
that
a problem.
Like,
It is what it
makes
is.
what makes it where you can't identify that? And
So this
not-
is the
as
amount.
brief as possible. I'm just curious because I know we've been running into that a lot.
Yeah.
Of just IBUs, we don't know. Like I'm curious why you don't have it for everything.
When they're coming up with the recipe and they're putting into the software they're using to tell them yes, and here's how the outcome is going to be from the recipe. They're not doing This is a fairly small brewery. Grains of Wrath, maybe they have test kitchen or a lab that they can send it to and do the chemical analysis of what's in it.
Holy cow.
It's based off of the recipe. So even as a home brewer, I'm using websites that have calculators to tell me what the IBU, what the SRM, what everything is going to be based on the ingredients that I'm putting in, because it knows what the alpha acidity is. You put that number in.
So if they're making this like the first time, they might not be able to tell you exactly what all the numbers are.
Not if it's a bigger production, yes, but if it's a smaller place, no, because they don't have a lab to send and do the testing with, because
that's a measurement.
That's expensive. That's
right,
super
and
expensive.
it's a new recipe.
And if especially this is not a year-round beer.
That makes sense. Cool.
So-
I was just curious about that part, but I personally like this one a little bit better.
So as a New
I feel
England
like-
style, double dry hopped. So what happens when you double dry hop with El Dorado and Cashmere, which are the two main hops,
good song.
as I have seen in most New England style. So super, super cushy on the tongue. It's just super dank, super rich. When you over hop with it, it becomes very rounded.
I was gonna say it's not like that Citra.
It's
There's not the
not
resinous.
in your face.
Pine.
No, I didn't get any
There's
Citra
no
right
pine.
either, no.
This is just
This
round.
is a fully
It's-
different beer.
It's like a coat on the tongue. So literally, like, take that winter coat and attach it to your tongue, because it's going to coat it and sit there.
Kids, lick your winter tongue.
Like a
Yes.
cashmere sweater.
And I can actually talk about the aromatics with this.
Yeah. Let's dig into it.
So
I'm curious.
I had this out of a glass, and it smelled like kind of warm tobacco to me.
A little bit.
And it was
like-
really comforting and nice. And a nice way to start my drink, my taste.
Did it have any like sweetness note? Did you get any like raw sugar or just like wet sugary kind of vibe off of the nose? Because I know that out of the copy and the reviews that I've seen, it's like dank, slightly tropical, kind of earthy, very gentle.
Yeah,
Nothing stood
earthy
out.
and gentle and maybe sweet, but I mean, I'm not a professional taster. It felt like walking into a tobacco drying barn in the summer.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of the smell it evokes.
Warm and
Tastes like
earthy.
home for me, the Virginia native.
So double dry hopping means, again, you're on your secondary. So you have your primary fermentation, you rack it off or move it into another vessel, and then you're adding what you would normally add for a secondary hopping, double the amount. So you have a lot of vegetal matter that's residually going to give you a lot of aromatics.
So double dry hopped is like double quantity,
Yes.
not repeating the process a second time.
No.
Yeah, and
Correct.
and I would say, the first beer, I didn't really take a big whiff, but this one, I smelled something as it approached my face, and I thought, hey, let's
Give it a shot.
smell the nose.
Yeah.
So as probably a beer that has over 60 IBUs, it's going to be really high because of the amount of hops that they put into it. A lot of the hopping is going to occur when they do the boil. That's where you're going to get your residual alpha acidity. But when you do dump a lot of hops into it, you take the risk of introducing bacteria, so it could get funky. You trust that the manufacturer is treating their product right, and you're not going to have bug matter and other things in it, but you never know. And it doesn't say if they used whole leaf or pellet. I'm going to assume they used pellet because whole leaf is. If you were
more
to dry
expensive.
hop with whole leaf, I've done that once.
Yeah.
It not only makes a gigantic freaking mess, it's really expensive. And again, it's a 10-to-1 ratio. So if I have to use 1 pound of pellet hops, I have to use 10 pounds of leaf hop.
Right.
And so if you're doubling that amount, that's how much volume of water are you taking up? Your whole vat is going to be nothing but leaf.
But leaves, yeah.
And that's not positive. You're not going to get a good outcome from that because you're introducing way too much opportunity for bacteria and things on that leaf matter. Even if it's been frozen or whatever, you're still taking that risk. And then
The bacterial load is just that much higher.
How much of the liquid then gets absorbed into that leaf matter is going to reduce the amount of output you have. So I'm guessing they probably use pellet because when most double and triple dry hop, they all use pellet because of just simply the amount of quantity it takes and expense, because it is so expensive to do it. It is not cheap. And you can do it year round because they're going to freeze dry a certain amount. And those producers are going to put aside, you put your order in at the beginning of the growing season.
Right.
This is what we need for the year. They grow to that. They produce. They give the people that have paid ahead of time for those hops. They know what they're doing each year. Breweries know what they're making each year.
It's like
at the
water
beginning of the
rights
year.
in Arizona.
Yeah,
Like
you've paid ahead for the product, and you hope the batch turns out, because then you have to go to somebody else if it doesn't and hope they have enough.
Right.
That's wholly
So, yeah,
appropriate.
we've digressed again into something completely different than talking about the beer itself.
So,
good
what do
beer.
we think matched the movie better?
The second one. The second one was way better, in my opinion. My humble opinion.
This was not a shoegaze movie. It was not like noise hops, wall of sound. No, like it was.
No one's gazing at any shoes in this one.
I think the pocket forensics worked better as also.
Yeah.
Boy,
I liked them both. I mean, normally I'm not a hop head, but that first one, even though it had such over the top hop, notes to it, like I liked it. But I think the second one matched the movie.
I feel like the first one, once it warmed up, matched the movie pretty well. It's about what I expected to flavor wise.
It was
while
far
watching
more
the movie.
enjoyable as it warmed up, I would say.
The second one was good. I liked it, but I didn't like it for this movie as much. I would have liked to watch something like maybe like a historical documentary or something while watching the second one. But for this like silly, at this point kind of silly.
This was a historical
cult classic.
documentary. 1997.
They didn't have cell phones or pagers.
I forgot we pitched that bit.
They had phones online on wire, and I was like,
Wired telephones, landlines.
Show this to anyone under the age of 20, and they're gonna freak the hell out. They're gonna be like,
I,
"What is that? A phone? That's not a phone.
But yeah, I feel
A computer? It took the whole room."
To get back to beer,
Yes.
valid point, Dan. But I feel like the first one, once it warmed up, matched the movie really well, in my opinion. But
You might sway my opinion with that argument.
yeah, this movie is sillier than I remembered. I pitched it when we were saying, what should we watch next? I thought, oh, I haven't watched this in a while. This could be fun. And then 10 minutes in, oh, this is not what I remembered. I was much younger and much more easily influenced by film.
I'll get it.
Much more easily amused.
All right, so Aaron, which of these two beers did you prefer?
I like them both. I think once I don't know. Once the Grains of Wrath warmed up, I think I liked the Dystopia a little bit better. That first sip is a little shocking
Harsh.
with so much hop in that beer.
The same vibe you get from watching the president's plane crash into the World Trade Center.
Right, yeah, and this like egg,
This egg.
yeah, this egg sort of emergency escape
Pac-Man's
lifeboat
down through the.
Right.
We were like, is he
Whap.
Mork? Because Mork came out of an egg too. He went
Yeah.
in an egg, and did he come out of? There was like
I would have loved to
padding
see
and
Robin Williams just
computers.
pop out and start just vamping. It's like, oh boy, oh, we're in Manhattan. Oh, City of Angels. Ooh, oh, no, wrong city.
Yeah, that's the second movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway, so
I apologize for that terrible Robin Williams impression.
you're forgiven. I think this is an interesting film. If you've never seen it, if you have young people under the age of 30,
If you got
who
people in
want-
their 30s, they might appreciate the nostalgia
the
feel
throwback,
of it,
yeah.
maybe?
Anyone under 30, it's going to be a hard sell.
Well, if
I
some
would
people
say-
like camp, if they like camp, if they like campy movies,
that's probably
like,
why I like it.
Yeah.
I would say it's part of cultural literacy.
yeah,
I mean, it was very much
a moment in time.
a moment in time. It was an early 80s film. This is a quintessential early 80s film.
I hold it up there in the same kind of light along those with like Ghostbusters, because there's the visuals, the reality of New York, what it was gritty, and I'm thinking just from a cultural visual standpoint, not what the actual movie was about, but
Yeah.
just the fact that they could show what it was at that moment in time, whereas this was made up dystopia. That one showed it. They're just driving around the streets. It's just like we have a
Is
we
that
have a
thing
camera
I-
on the corner, and we're just panning with them as they
That
go.
thing that always annoys me, which I understand, but it's the thing that always gets on my skin of the city's a character. Like, yeah, but
Is it?
people use it so often, I feel like they're copying out a lot. This one, the city was nothing. The city was a backdrop for our lead to be sort of menacing and always cranky.
Yes.
Well, shooting at people and poorly escaping rat people. He should have just ran down the street.
He should have.
Not keep going up in the building.
he should have used some of those bullets he made a door for himself with.
Yeah.
Right.
And there was at least 40 bullets that he did that with. And I was like, oh, that's
Pretty impressive for a guy with one eye showing.
Yeah. No, like, how do you shoot a gun with
Pretty
one
good
eye?
perception. Depth perception.
Very carefully. Anyway. So.
Movie of the century.
Yes.
Better than Casablanca.
We're kicking, we're
4.5 out of 10.
kicking the new year off with a strange one and dystopian and future. And that was in the past. A dystopian past that we seek to embrace.
I'd say I'd recommend it if you like camp, if you like kind of if you like camp. It's not a bad movie. I don't regret watching it, but
Right.
I don't think I'm ever gonna see it a second time.
Yeah.
I think I'm good.
if you watch it, you'll know what other people are talking about when they
Right.
reference the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
If you're-
there's
if you're
not
on
a
a Kurt-
whole lot of references from this.
Nah, if you're on a Kurt Russell run, it's worth popping in.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's part of the
80s nostalgia.
yeah.
Yeah.
The,
I mean,
yeah.
If I had to pick, I'd go Tombstone over this, but that's for another day.
Blade Runner. What about Blade Runner?
He's not in Blade Runner.
No, I was going to say, if you were to choose between Blade Runner and this movie,
Oh, Blade Runner.
Blade Runner.
I'd take
yeah.
Blade Runner.
That's
Like,
Yeah.
not a hard choice.
Yeah,
All right.
that one's less
That's
tricky.
much more artful.
One's well done and one is not.
Between this movie and getting a nail in your leg.
oh, this
There
movie.
we go.
This movie.
All right, yeah, this movie.
This movie. All right. So, as always, the opinions expressed during the taping of this recording are those of the hosts, and we want to thank you for hanging out and listening. And find some interesting beers to have if you're going to watch it, or find yourself some lemonade and have the kids.
If you don't
do their
hydrate,
thing.
you're gonna dihydrate.
Because there's like practically very little to no nudity. There's very little to no foul language, more than you would hear on normal cable TV today, anyway. And not necessarily kid appropriate, but teenager appropriate. The teenagers,
I think teens would be-
if they dig the '80s, they'll like this.
Teens could find some stuff to put on TikTok on this.
yeah.
Well,
they
and-
would.
and-
They would film themselves watching it.
The violence in death here is not like over the top gory or anything.
No, there's
like
no,
that.
there's
It's
no
fairly
spraying
understated.
blood or anything.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
very, very, very mild. So,
Yeah.
all right. Well,
Well, thanks for listening and joining us, listener. Until next time, please do your part to keep the crime rate from growing to 400%.
This is Blake Pliskin signing out.
Oh, God.
And this is Brian. Remember, put some chandeliers on your cars.
they're classy. So, thanks everybody for listening. We'll catch you on the next episode.
John Carpenter.